Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. Here I am in St. Petersburg. And behind me is the Winter Palace. So it's an early 18th century Baroque construction. It's more of a Western European style. It's the sort of thing that wouldn't look out of place in Italy or France, for example. Of course, in the 18th century, France was the last word in style, la grande nation, and its cultural influence over the rest of the European world was immense, including here in Russia, where a lot of the French aristocracy started speaking French more than Russian. You just need to dip into War and Peace to see that. Anyway, so the Romanov dynasty lived here. Remember, they took over in 1613, and then this city became the capital in 1713, although the city was actually founded in 1703. Anyway, it's a very significant site because, of course, the storming of the Winter Palace was the beginning of the October Revolution in 1917. So what was the situation in 1917? Well, the First World War was still on. There'd been the February Revolution in 1917 when the Tsar had been overthrown and he was kept under house arrest in Tsarskoye Selo before being moved to Yekaterinburg. Anyway, there's a provisional government, and by October 1917 it was led by Alexander Kerensky, who was Prime Minister. It was a coalition government of several parties, the Socialist Revolutionaries, of which Kerensky was one, the Cadets, as in Constitutional Democrats, the Mensheviks, Trudoviki, and others. The various Soviets have been set up. A Soviet is like a council, a workers' council. So workers seizing control of factories, of railway lines, of all sorts of things, tram lines, banks, even hospitals, and just running it, electing their own people. And then in Petrograd, St. Petersburg was called Petrograd at the time, there was the Petrograd Soviet, as in like a council of councils, all the factories and tram lines and even army regiments, warships, sending their elected representatives to the Petrograd Soviet. And the Bolsheviks, which had been a minuscule political party until 1917, been underground because they were illegal, they became the major force in the Petrograd Soviet. And the president of the Petrograd Soviet was Lev Davidovich Bronstein, or Trotsky as he was better known. Anyway, the provisional government had chosen to carry on fighting against Germany. Lenin, leader of the Bolsheviks, had been in exile in Switzerland for many years, and he'd come back from Zurich with German assistance on that sealed train, got to Finland. Remember, Finland was part of the Russian Empire until 1918, and taken the train from Finland, arrived at the Finland station here in St. Petersburg, walked straight out of the station to a rapturous welcome from the Bolsheviks, got onto a bench and began expostulating the Bolshevik message. Immediately peace bred land, put an end to this useless war against the Germans. Why should a working class Russian kill a working class German, or vice versa? End this senseless slaughter. This is a capitalist imperialist war for profits to enrich the already rich and will only impoverish the proletariat. So that was that. So they began agitating against the war and trying to bring down the provisional government. So the Bolsheviks were obviously Marxists, and they believed that they must have a proletarian revolution. That's to say, the working class must be in the saddle and put the working class first. And they had more support amongst the industrial working class and the major urban centres, St. Petersburg, Moscow, and so forth. So anyway, they'd fallen out with the provisional government. They'd attempted to overthrow the provisional government in June 1917, but defeated the June days. But then in late August, early September 1917, there's a very confused affair, the Kornilov coup, where General Lavr Kornilov had come back from the front, attempting to overthrow Kerensky, or was he? It's very difficult to figure out what actually happened to separate claim from counterclaim. Or was he asked back by Kerensky, or he believed Kerensky was taken hostage by the Bolsheviks, or what? Anyway, the long and the short of it is Kornilov was some sort of conservative who tried to seize power. He was defeated, but Kerensky had to use the Red Guards, as the Bolsheviks' private army, to help him defeat Kornilov. So the Red Guards, that's the Bolsheviks' militia, were given their weapons back. Lenin had been in hiding. He published his April theses in 1917 about why there must be a dictatorship of the proletariat and must be immediate overthrow of the provisional government. They must have no truck with bourgeois parties like the Cadets and so on. And that was that. Make peace with Germany immediately, even if that meant huge concessions. So the battleship Aurora in the Gulf of Finland was controlled by Bolshevik sailors, and it fired a dud round in the middle of the night, and that was a signal for the Red Guards to storm the Winter Palace, which was very lightly guarded by some teenage cadets and by the Women's Death Battalion. So as not enough men were coming forward for the war in 1917, the Russian government had taken the unprecedented decision to allow women to volunteer for the army, to shave their heads. They thought the sight of this would shame manhood into volunteering to fight. And that was that. So not a single person was killed in storming the Winter Palace. There was a bit of other skirmishing in the city that day. Only 6 people were killed on the first day of the revolution. There was heavy fighting later. By far the most vivid and riveting account of it is 10 Days That Shook the World by the American journalist John Reed, who was here at the time and later in Moscow. So you should see that Reds, a film, came out in 1980, starring Warren Beatty as John Reed, and who else has got it? There's Louise Bryant, another American socialist journalist who was here. There's Diane Keaton and various other people in it. Jack Nicholson as Eugene O'Neill, the celebrated American writer. Anyway, John Reed, he died in 1920. He's interred in Moscow at the Kremlin War necropolis. Well, his ashes are there. It's an extraordinary accolade. He's one of only 3 Americans to be accorded that singular honor. So, as I say, the Bolsheviks seized power here, and they gained control of Petrograd fairly easily. Kerensky fled with a car led by the American embassy. However, there was heavy fighting in Moscow. I won't go into it, but there was a civil war in Russia for the next 5 years or so until the Bolsheviks triumphed. They renamed themselves the Communist Party, and in December 1922 they founded the Soviet Union. So this is Palace Square. And you can see that cupola behind me. That is St. Isaac's Cathedral. I was up on the edge of that cupola earlier today. And then here's this column. This obelisk is the Alexander Monument. And there are various other things I could point out. So this was really the focal point of Russia. This is the largest and most magnificent square in Russia. And then behind the column, you can't see it very well, is the General Staff Arch, as in General Staff of the Army. So many illustrious events have taken place here. And then if you look carefully at the gates, you'll see these are double-headed eagles of the Romanov dynasty. The one that was overthrown in 1917 because the whole family was shot dead on the 17th of July 1918. And these symbols were taken down. There's a lot of iconoclasm going on in the early years of communist rule. Over the last 10 years or so, they've been replaced. And then you can see the most awe-inspiring works of art there from all countries, oil paintings, stelae from what's now Syria, and things like that. I could go on and on. Ancient Egyptian artifacts, mummies, really, you name it, ceramics, relief sculptures, friezes, they're all in there. Works of art too numerous to mention. All right, that's enough for the moment from Palace Square in St. Petersburg.